Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the University of Nebraska at Omaha's Center for Public Affairs Research's Data and Research Series for Community Impact, Part 2, live. And we are so excited you are joining us live. We think it is a great opportunity, even in an online format, to connect with people like ourselves that are using data and research to make an impact in our communities. And we really appreciate that. We know how hard it is and we know how important it is. So thank you for being here. The mission of the Center for Public Affairs Research is to produce and disseminate high quality public scholarship on topics that impact the lives of Nebraskans. This series has allowed us to live our mission for the past 30 years. And this year's part 1 and part 2 fit really perfectly with our mission. The first part was about accessing data, getting on different resources, mostly the Census Bureau, but lots of resources out there to access data. And today we're going to talk about dissemination, applying data to make sure it has an impact. We are so glad you are with us. Welcome to those who are joining us for the first time, and welcome to so many that join us year after year, so thank you. We want to talk about a couple changes this year, particularly to our registration system. The University of Nebraska system has created the Canvas web pages to house the program and their own registration system. And we know it was a little frustrating, hopefully not too bad for you. It definitely was for us, just because we lost a little control over the process. We couldn't really help people get access to things as we have in the past. But thank you for getting here. Thanks for dealing with something new. We actually learned they rolled out 2 new features all on us. So we were the pilot program. We think long-term, this is going to have a lot of benefits to us, though. That system, we are hoping eventually to offer credentialing so that you can tell your employer you spent this time with us and you learned some really great tips for data analysis for impact. And it will also house possibly other programs you take from different departments across the whole University of Nebraska system. So eventually it's going to be a good thing for all of us, but thank you for making it here today and working with us. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you're still having trouble getting onto the Canvas landing page, because that is where the recordings and presentations from today will end up. So we want you to get there. You'll have access to it for a full year. It is important that everyone at your organization that paid gets there eventually. We provided the links for easy access this morning, but we want you to use those because it'll have more than just this live presentation for you. So reach out if you're still having problems. We're here to help. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about the plan for today. This morning, we are in webinar mode, and I will be speaking. I'll be the only presenter this morning on applying data to impact the lives of Nebraskans. Really excited to deep dive into that topic with you. That session will run till 10:30. And we are going to take a short break, 15 minutes, and hop over to a different Zoom. That Zoom page will be a traditional Zoom, so it will allow us to interact. So this morning, chill, relax, nobody can see you, but we really want you to come in. If you can, screens on. We want to see you. We really want to interact with you. We have an all-star lineup of breakout presenters that I know are going to get you talking and asking questions. You're going to want to ask them questions. So we appreciate you coming back ready to have fun with us. Just a little bit about that awesome lineup. Cami Watkins will be talking about using data to understand root causes to disparate outcomes. Emily Wynn, Deputy Director of the Whites Foundation, Best Practices in Sharing Data with Funders and Foundations. Renee Fry, Best Practices in Sharing Data with Elected Officials. I'll be in there with you. And Finding and Applying Financial Data to Governance Challenges with Craig Maher. These are presenters you've probably seen or heard about in the past, and we are so excited to interact with them on this topic. Don't worry if you want to attend multiple sessions. Go to the one that you want to ask all the questions at. Have a lot of fun live, but we're recording all of them. And we have figured that out this time. So they will be on that Canvas landing page in a couple of days after the session. We will email you when those recordings are ready. Couple things before we get started here. The chat feature is enabled, but we really only want to use that for broadcasting messages out to you all because only I, as the panelist, will see them. For questions to me as the presenter, please use that Q&A. That allows me to work through them as they come in and also let other people see what kind of questions are coming in. And don't worry, we want those questions. I think we have a pretty interactive presentation for you this morning. So get them in early and often. Sometimes I can answer them as we go, but if not, we should have some time at the end. We actually don't seem to have closed captioning enabled, but we might get that on here in a minute if we can. We are recording. That's for everybody's benefit so they can see this after. With that, I think I am ready to present. You'll just give me a moment to get my screens up. There we go. Okay. One more time, I just like there we go. Okay. We seeing the right screen? Hopefully.
Yes.
Thanks, Matt. And are you able to get closed captioning on? You might be having.
I'm looking for it right now, yeah.
Okay, thank you. If not, we can maybe get some of that in post-production. Well, applying data to impact the lives of Nebraskans. So I think the two words I want to separate part one from part two. Part one was about accessing data, and accessing data is a real challenge. Accessing data from lots of different resources and lots of different formats. Census Bureau is changing things up. I don't know if you've seen, but they just rolled out a new look to their website. It does look much better, but you know, now you have to find things a whole different way. So accessing in part one, two, applying. So there are a range of data points that exist to characterize the lives of Nebraskans. We know that. Do we always have access to the ones we want? Maybe, maybe not, but you can always reach out to us. We want to be good partners in that process. But once we have the data, we have to share the data. And I think this is where I think some people actually get more stuck. They have the data, they know they have data, but we want to use data to persuade people, to change behaviors, to change minds, to teach, to learn. And I think sometimes we're not even really comfortable saying that's what we're trying to do. But of course, that's what we're trying to do. We all want to build better communities, help the people around us make better choices. If it's public, private, nonprofit sector, every day we're making choices and decisions that impact others' lives. And so we want to bring evidence to bear on those situations. We want to feel confident that we're making good choices. And that's what this is about. There is not one way to do this. I wish there was one way to do this. I might be out of a job, but at least we'd all have a great toolkit. Analysis, visualization, dissemination, teaching is really hard, right? Again, go ask a teacher. They will tell you it's a very hard job and it doesn't always work the same way, at the same time, every time. And so that's what makes it so challenging. Plus you add all sources of data, good data, bad data, different ways to work with it. And now we kind of get overwhelmed. And I think sometimes we just take a pass on using data to be persuasive. I want to help build some confidence to do it. It is hard. I struggle with it and I get to do it. Hopefully we have time at the end. I have an example. I'm working on a new slide that I think is going to be really impactful, but currently it looks terrible. So I'm not ready to show it yet, but hopefully through seeing all of us have that struggle, we can learn how to do this a little bit better together. I am going to learn to use my mouse. Okay, just a quick quote too to get us started on this. This comes from Moneyball for Government, Republican and Democratic Director of the Office of Management and Budget worked together on this book and now sort of website about using data in government. And they claim, and some people disagree with this claim, that $1 out of every $100 in the federal government is actually backed by evidence. Now, evidence is a pretty broad term, so I would guess, right, people's opinions can be evidence. So I would guess that's not quite true, but good, solid, the best available evidence, they're probably pretty on target. And that's what we're trying to break up here, right? There's no reason that any of us should be sort of groping in the dark for answers. We have data available to us to put together, to inform, governance, policy, but also, like I said, nonprofits, private sector, all sorts of organizations are making decisions that impact our lives, and it would be best to do it with a little bit of evidence. So let's get started. I have 3 substantive takeaways for you. Again, in part 1, we did that state and local government trends analysis that is pretty consistent for this. So that was a lot of substance. I go out and give presentations all the time on different topics as well, but these are the 3 I'm gonna substantively talk about today, but we work on all sorts of topics. I think you all know that, so don't hesitate to reach out. Nebraskans are leaving the state for job opportunities. Education is essential to high wage and high growth jobs in Nebraska. Entrepreneurship, wage equity, and education are opportunities for the Nebraska economy. And I'll even say it's kind of a stagnant Nebraska economy. And hopefully we'll get to talk about that a little bit as well. Clearly in the economic development space here today, workforce, education. 3 analytical takeaways. There are tons of ways to teach analysis, research, data visualization. I have a whole stack of books right next to me on the topic. These are the 3 I thought made sense for today. I thought we could talk about pretty easily. And I think they're overarching in a way that's helpful. They don't come from one place. There's not a textbook that talks about these 3 specific things. These are just sort of what I'm dealing with as I go through analysis, and I think they might be useful tips for you as well. So apply the rules of argumentation to your analysis. Argumentation is this broad field, legal scholars use it, philosophy scholars use it, right? That logic, rational decision-making models. And I think we all kind of know that arguments have a particular flow, but sometimes we get in our data brains and we don't quite think about exactly where the data leads. So clear argument defines main messages, and it starts at main messages, right? It doesn't start deep in the weeds of the data. It starts with main messages. It evidences connections. It uses data to tell people how things work together, and then it finds opportunities for solutions. You don't want to leave folks with sort of just a bad taste in their mouth, nothing they can do. You want to focus on what are the opportunities as a result of this argument. So here's my argument for this morning. Nebraskans are leaving the state. The Nebraskans most likely to leave are well-educated and have a high income. And Nebraskans leave for better job opportunities. That is my sort of starting point for solutions. Nebraskans leave for better job opportunities. Not just that they leave, but we kind of know a little bit about where they leave. And so it's a starting place for solutions. And all arguments honestly follow this very simple logic. If Nebraskans are leaving the state, and if the Nebraskans most likely to leave are well-educated and have a high income, that's an assumption, right? That is something I need to prove with evidence to you. You don't know that one. You know Nebraskans are leaving the state. Why they are leaving the state, you don't know. So I need to help you get there. Then I can kind of jump. Then this is what we should do about it. We should solve this particular problem, not some other problem. Arguments are robust, they're logical, right? These should follow for people. They make their assumptions clear and then they go back and evidence them. I will say it's probably best to start by specifying your conclusion, then work through what assumptions you have to make to get there, right? How do you get to Nebraskans leave for better job opportunities? That way, because you want to end up there. You want people to take that message away more than any other message. So how do you sort of organize your data to get there faster? So and I'll actually say there's a problem in this argument. And it wasn't totally intentional, but I think it's a good learning lesson. So let's jump in. Nebraskans are leaving the state. In 2020, Nebraska net lost 4,760 people to other states. That's looking at people that come in, inflow of 47,000, outflow of 52,000. So don't forget, people come in and out. It's not like everyone leaves. And 4,760 people is not actually a lot, but it is a negative trend, right? It is consistently trending down. And I'll actually show you 2021 data here too. This is a standard slide from the Census Bureau, quick data to get. We also have it available on our dashboard website, governing.unomaha.edu. So hopefully now you accept that Nebraskans are leaving the state. Some people don't accept that, but it is true. So my next claim was that Nebraskans are most likely, the Nebraskans most likely to leave are well educated. Okay, brain drain or net outmigration of persons with a bachelor's degree or more has persisted. So again, this is a standard table from the Census Bureau. It's actually 2 tables. I went and gave them to you down there. They are a little harder to find because they're pretty in-depth. But again, quick, accessible data that Nebraskans are well educated. So here's 2010 to 2020 by these 3 groups of education, and you will see the negative trend for bachelor's degree or more. I actually think it's interesting that this high school graduate or less has sort of switched here in 2020. My argument actually used to be that the reason high school graduate or some college and associate's degree were coming in was because lower wage jobs pay better here. But this switch is something I'm going to be watching because my argument may need to change. That's not actually true anymore if we start to see those less educated folks leaving as well. So Nebraskans most likely to leave are well educated. Hopefully now you accept that fact. The Nebraskans most likely to leave have a high income. So here we have income categories, again, standard table from Census Bureau. I did use the 2021 1 year just because I was interested in migration trends in 2021. We always suggest using the 5-year data from the American Community Survey for the United States Census Bureau. It's just a little bit more robust. It is for that last year, but they use data from years prior to make sure, kind of smooth any outliers. So this might not be, this isn't the final number, I will say, for outmigration, but I thought it was interesting, so I threw it in there. So here we have net domestic migration. So people come in and come out. Here's net, how many people left by income. You'll see the only one that's positive is the 15,000 to 24,999. It's kind of right here, I would say. Sorry. And then you will see it is highest for those made 75,000 or more. You do see pretty high numbers here in the middle, but if we added all of these sort of high wage, which I would say is starting at this 50,000, the number of loss is higher. So the Nebraskans most likely to leave do have a higher income, although we'll see lots of Nebraskans leave. Actually, so that 2021 number compared to the 2020 number I showed you before is 6,107. So it is still trending up or still trending down. We are losing more people year after year. Again, that might be a little inflated, and we'll check that when the 5 years come out, but I wanted to share that. So pretty quick, pretty simple, right? Clear argument defines those main messages, and it lets the logic persuade you. In fact, I don't even have to show you the conclusion if you believe that Nebraskans are leaving the state, and if the Nebraskans that are likely to leave are well educated and have a high income, then you should accept that Nebraskans are leaving for better job opportunities, right? It should feel clear that that's where we end up. What is wrong with this analysis? And you all are probably saying it because I know I'm surrounded by smart people. Sometimes wish I wasn't. The Nebraskans most likely to leave are well educated and have a high income doesn't tell you necessarily anything about job opportunities. Now, I happen to know that the unemployment rate for people that are well educated is the lowest, right? We have low unemployment anyway, but people who have a bachelor's degree are working here in Nebraska and pretty much everywhere else, but especially here in Nebraska, they have the lowest unemployment rate. And it's the same thing, that those that have a high income are very likely to be working as well. Some people might kind of pick at that argument like, oh, well, it's family money, or, you know, it's land money or something like that. But no, most people here earn their incomes. That's pretty much true. So I accept those assumptions. I tend to think that those people that are around me accept those assumptions. But it is a poor argument if I go talk to someone that doesn't accept those assumptions, right? They're going to pick the holes in this really quick. And they're going to say, well, how do you know? Again, I could kind of draw out the argument then to solve that problem. I could produce new data. So again, in a good argument, you don't always have to share that. But I do happen to have this slide that I've worked on. This comes from the current population survey from the US Census Bureau, so it is a little bit harder to access data. I was trying to make as simple an argument as possible with data you all could grab, but it seemed prescient to show you this. Of those that have left Nebraska, so I can go and look at people that lived in Nebraska at one point, now live in another state, and ask them, hey, why did you leave? Current population survey does at least. And the number one reason is new job or job transfer. That is generally true for everyone that moves to another state. Actually, if we jump back to this income, so I can do this nationally, and you'll pretty much always see this. Higher income folks move states. Lower income folks tend to be more, tend to move around more within a place. So within a county or within a city. And in fact, for this question, if you ask those, same thing, nationally, anyone who moves out of state, it's 33% is for a new job or transfer. So it kind of starts to say to me, well, everybody moves for a new job, right? That's why people move states. Within a county, the number one reason folks move is housing costs, which I don't even know is up here. So other housing reason is a reason people move states, but other for housing costs specifically in Nebraska and nationally, that's why people move within a county. So kind of interesting. If you came to part one, Mike Norton talked a lot about housing and housing costs on the rise here in Nebraska. So that sort of relates. However, my point is not to necessarily have to do this, but because I made some hard assumptions, some jumpy assumptions, maybe I do need to prove that. Or like I said, I could show another slide where I demonstrate that no, well-educated and high income earners in Nebraska are working. So job opportunities are important to them. Or sometimes I kind of let the logic do the work for me. I think people know that. You can make arguments as complicated as you want. I recently read a whole book on this topic, using logic for strategy in private sector organizations, right? And they make charts with all sorts of lines coming up and out and in. But decision-making research does tell us the more complicated the argument, the more jumps, the more assumptions, the less likely people are to just believe you, right? They sort of kind of drop it down. So in this one, I have done some work on wages. Wages are higher in other states across all different occupations. I'll show a little bit of that later. So maybe it has more to do with pay and job opportunities, or job opportunities or pay. But as I make it more complicated and put more data into it, you think, right, us data nerds think, oh, well, that means people believe us more. No, we kind of lose people pretty quickly when the logic and the jumps get too many. So like, I really wanted to put up my wage slide when I look at median incomes, and then we compare them by states, and oh, even in the region, we're pretty low. Nah, I've kind of lost people at this point. You want to make as few jumps as possible. I was trying to think of some examples when we do this. We do a lot of presentations. We put together a lot of data and infographics. We're rarely called to very specifically make an argument on a specific point like this. So this tip of mine to use argumentation, I don't even do that often. But when I do it, I do think it works. So here's an example, and we were asked to do this by a state senator who's working on some housing issues, particularly in rural Nebraska. And I don't think I even had this concept in my head when I did this, but this is how good sort of policy analysis runs. So in this particular infographic, which you can get on our website, I say, if a large group of middle income earners in Nebraska can't afford median home prices, right, which is kind of what this slide is about, this reference line, there's this gap. There's this group of people who make a middle income, but they can't afford a middle income house, right? And if housing prices are rising rapidly, and if housing stock is low, then we should support policies to build homes that are priced for middle income people, right? If you accept these three things are true, then you should kind of jump to this last place with me. You should agree that this is the likely outcome. And I would say I'm both simplifying it, but it is how our brains work, right? If you think about it, if you accept this and you accept this and you accept this, then this is what you should do. I think of one example of this. When I was presenting my dissertation way back, I had already moved to Texas. And so I do think we use Zoom. So I was presenting on Zoom, but we didn't use Zoom as well as we do now. And so I think I couldn't see them. I could hear them, but I couldn't see them. So one of the things I did in the presentation, just to make sure everyone was tracking, pretty much after every slide I said, does everyone understand? Got it? Is that right? Well, I tend to think, right, in dissertations, the whole point is to ask 100 questions and to really challenge the presenter. But because I did that, if you accept this, if you accept this, if you accept this, when I got to the end, they were all like, oh, well, we already told her it was fine. So I'll never know if it was because it was a good dissertation or the good luck of presenting online. But this is the logic of argumentation. If you accept all of these claims to be true, when we get to the end, people tend to be like, oh, well, I said that was true. I guess this is true now too. So it does work. This is how we organize. So some tips for applying these rules. Main messages should be clear, direct, and as simple as possible. People say this constantly on almost everything we do, but we tend to just go in the weeds really fast. Think about your argument. Know your takeaway before you start your analysis. And yeah, that sometimes that's a little leading, but it is a good way to jumpstart your analysis, right? If you go to data.census.gov and just say, what should I know? It's not going to answer it for you. So really think about the argument you're trying to make. Start there, be clear, simple, and direct. How do I get there in as few jumps as possible? Find the best available evidence. This is the most important thing I can say. I see people all the time make arguments with bad evidence. I'm a professor at a university, so you probably wouldn't be surprised that I see that. But you want to find the best available evidence. You want to find the data point that does it as fast, right? That I don't have to explain it over and over again, or it isn't sort of in that middle range, that jump, right? I don't want to show you I don't want to show you that bachelor's degrees have a low unemployment rate, because I think that's going to get you off topic too fast. So thinking about that best available evidence. But that is the hard part, and that's what I do understand, especially because new evidence is costly. When I go out and give presentations, a lot of times they're like, oh, we want to do a survey on this, or we want to interview people on that. That takes a lot of time, and time is money, and it also costs money to do things like that. You want to find what exists first, and you really want to think creatively about it. Census data tips, review those surveys. I'll link them for you. If it's in the survey, it's on data.census.gov. So, and then they usually cross-tab almost everything together, right? There's a table for this and that. They are hard to find. The Census Bureau presenters from part one made it look really easy. They knew all the keywords and they filtered and they got there in a second to just the table they happen to want. I can't do that. And I do it all the time. I can't do that. I suggest don't filter. And until you're really comfortable and you've seen a lot of tables, just search, scroll through. Is it that and that? Sometimes you find the keyword you need and then you can filter a little bit more. But I think a lot of people go in with the wrong keywords. I always give this example, right? There's income, there's earnings, there's wages. Those are three different things in the Census Bureau's position. But if you put in income, you're not going to see earnings and wages, or you might, but it's going to be way down. But actually you want earnings or wages because you're doing workforce research or something like that. So I do tell people, look at the surveys, that'll help you find some keywords, but scroll through those tables or reach out. We're happy to help. If the data doesn't exist, consider changing your argument. Before I would collect new data, I would see if there's something faulty in this argument, or there's some tweak I could make that possibly improves the argument and simplifies the data I need to bring to bear on the situation. Complicated is not always better. Use the narrative arc of an argument to organize your information. Again, I think we get so excited by data that we tend to data, and we don't think about where we're trying to go with the data. Again, I see this one a lot. I probably do it in presentation a lot too. There's a set of slides I like to show people on particularly like workforce and education topics, and I don't necessarily put them in the order that helps people understand what I'm seeing the same way I'm seeing it, right? And you also have the benefit of seeing it before they do. So realizing that they're not going to organize it the same way you do after having seen it so many times. So helping them to understand how those steps get there. Right, we are naturally gonna think problem definition, assumptions, evidence, conclusions. So put it that way for folks. This one is also probably, some people would call this probably leading. I think it's just good practice. You want to know the counterclaim, right? People always have objectives with things I say. That particular argument, right? Gosh. Oh, well, yeah, Nebraskans are leaving, but that's because they're, you know, it's related to the agriculture industry. No, it's not. Let me think. Oh, well, yeah, the university educates them and then everybody leaves. No, there's 400,000 bachelor's degrees here working. It's actually property taxes. It's not. We've asked, it's not. I don't like property taxes either. They're high, but it's not why people are moving. Oh, well, people focus on their net wages versus their gross wages. And so that it's taxes. There's actually research on this topic. I haven't done it. None of my sources look at it, but actually people do tend to think in net, not gross, right? When I get my salary offer, I hear the net number. You really got to go through a lot of trouble to look at it as gross versus net, excuse me. So we tend to think in the gross, not the net. But people will argue, no, that's what they're focused on. No, oh, it's housing. Yeah, we asked them. It's not. Oh, there's cheaper housing, 5%. But that's what people do. Sorry, that's their job, especially policymakers, but lots of people. It is their job to question your assumptions. I suggest not putting counterclaims and objections in a presentation or even in a formal report or memo or something like that. I think it distracts people. Right, it gets them off the argument track. And it's already hard to stay on the argument track, especially when we're pulling data from different places and visualizing it differently. It's already hard to stay focused. So if we put all the things that people say right in it, I think it distracts them. Some people would say, you know, researchers should do that. And I would say in academic scholarship, we are very careful to do that. But I would say if you want to make a really good point, and there is research to support me here, you want to know what people are going to say, you want to think about it, you want to have data to refute it, but you don't necessarily want to show it all. Or if you do, kind of show it after, but don't mess up that arc of the story. Okay, your audience has limited attention, just like you all. We're going to do a little game in a minute that will really point this out to you. And we all know it. After about 10 minutes, anywhere I am distracted and on my phone. Everyone knows that about me, but it's not just me, it's all of us. Maybe you don't get on your phone like I do, but people have limited attention. It is silly to think even the most engaged and excited and invested audience, right? Someone pays a bunch of money to come see you. It doesn't mean they have any more attention, right? Attention is limited. So we really need to think about that in all of our analysis and all of our presentations of data. And this is where it gets hard, right? There is rule upon rule upon rule. I want to just give you some really broad ones that I think help. First, visual formatting of evidence is effective. It really, really is. If I say it versus I show it to you, especially if I show it in bright colors like somebody did here, people tend to be more engaged. Doesn't necessarily mean they learn more, but they are more engaged. It should also increase comprehension, appeal. It communicates expertise, right? You all think I'm much smarter than I probably am because I tend to use really fancy visuals. Actually, I think it was someone from the Department of Economic Development the other day said to me, I was giving a presentation and they said, oh, we just love when you come with all that data. It looks so great. And I was like, oh, thank you. But it's not a performance. We really think it's very useful data that you can act on and build a more evidence-informed Nebraska economic development policies, but happy to make it fancy as well. That's kind of the trade-off too, right? Now people just think it's something cute we do. It's really not. We think it's useful data. but it does tend to communicate expertise or some knowledge, right? That I've spent some time on this thing. And it does help with analysis and retention. However, we break all the rules of data viz all the time. I do, lots of people do. Mostly because there's no perfect data viz. And again, just like all analysis and research, there's not one way to do it. I can't say do this and you'll have the perfect data viz. But the one we break the most is this very careful consideration of attention. We have limited attention spans. So let's play a quick game to demonstrate that. Everybody just take a break. Hands down, no pens, no papers, no cheating. Doesn't work if you do. So listen closely to the names of state senators I'm going to read. Don't write anything or take notes, just listen and do try to remember as many as you can. Lynn Walls, Mike Hilgers, Mark Coulterman, Anna Wishart, Terrell McKinney, Ben Hansen, Joni Albright, Tom Brewer, Steve Erdman, Mike Moser, Julie Slama, Steve Lathrop, Dan Hughes, Kurt Friesen, Mike McDonald, John Lowe, Megan Hunt, Elliot Bostar, John Kavanaugh, Matt Williams. Now, write down as many as you can remember. Who knew we were going to have this much fun this morning? Give you a minute. Just as many as you can remember in whatever order. Okay. So I would love to hear from you all how many. I've seen this done live and I've seen people cheat too, which is really fun. The magic number of working memory tends to be 7 plus or minus 2. And the plus or minus 2 is 1 because we all have different working memories. But I will say there are probably, particularly in this group with the list of state senators I used, and you can do this with anything. Maybe some of you work with state senators more, so you know them a little bit more. Maybe some work with them a little less, so you know them a little bit more. Here's some other things I've seen happen. Probably got the first one, Lynn Walls. Maybe got the last one, Matt Williams. Hopefully that's true, right? Because the first thing I say and the last thing I say, you're paying attention to. They're in the middle. It's all muddled. So if one of them was your state senator, you probably got them, right? Because you know them, you have a reference point there. If I said one kind of differently, I think I meant to do it, but I didn't necessarily do it very intentionally. But if something about my voice either went up or down, you probably got that one because it sort of broke it up for you, right? I hope some of these are true and feel free to put in the chat, yeah, no, or that didn't work at all. Tends to be people like to, especially if they're in a group and want to impress people, people go 9 or 10. You're supposed to say, okay, read them out to me because they're usually wrong. Someone might have written down one that I didn't say because you're like, oh, state senators, I know that. That happens sometimes too. But if we can really only remember 6 or 7 things at a time, what are we all doing? Why are we all giving these hour-and-a-half long presentations? Not actually very useful tool for sharing information. And doesn't matter, we still all do it. I actually just went to a seminar at Stanford where we sat there all day, every day. Do try to change things up every 6 or 7 minutes a little bit. But this is a rule we all break. But it is a rule that once we know this idea of working memory and how much we can really hold and the tools to help people with working memory, comparison, contrast, repetition, reference, grouping, timing, first, last, right? If we can use those tools, wow, we are going to actually be superpower data visualizers. So I picked a couple examples from my work, and then I pick on the Bureau of Labor here a little bit just for fun. But I want you to kind of think about working memory as we work through these things. And then remember too, back to argumentation. If it's a really long argument, you lost them. Okay, so this is from the Bureau of Labor. One thing I really like is it's really clear. They believe education pays. I know education pays too. Not at this doctoral degree level that I live, but everybody else, it goes up. So I like a lot of things about this slide. I don't like a lot of things about this slide. Remember, comparison, contrast, repetition, reference, grouping, timing, first and last. That's 8, so I should make it 7. But those are the things that really help us to make sense of things quicker. So really clear takeaway. Okay, some labeling. I know what everything is. So there's some contrast here. One thing is in blue, one thing's in green. They also work in different directions. So this is saying median usual weekly earnings goes up as you get more education, except for the doctoral degree messes everything up. And unemployment rate goes up as you have less education. So it's clear. These reference lines are really hot in data viz right now because making reference to something really helps sort of frame you. So these reference lines are to the median for both, for the whole grouping. Doesn't really help me here because it's not very well labeled and I don't really know what the scale is, but okay. What don't I like about it? So I like some things about it. Blue and green really change these things here, but that they both use bar graphs, right? The same type of graph for different information kind of leaves me a little confused. I know that education pays, but it doesn't explain the relationship to me. Some people are visual, some people read. Visual and verbal stimulus are really helpful. Yeah. See, they group things, but I don't really have like a grouping of here, like where things change or how things work together. Yeah, the first thing I read is education pays, and that stays with me, so that's good. So here's my version of the slide. It is different. So education pays, I actually stole it from them. I've never had that on this slide before, but I was like, oh, that makes sense. It's real clear. But then I say those with a bachelor's degree make over $12,500 more per year than those with some college. I've built in a little analysis for you. I've said from here to here, that's 12,500. And I did that because I think 12,000 to most people is, oh, that's a lot of money. I wouldn't mind that 12,500 more a year, right? So it helps somebody do a little thinking. I don't do math in my head. It's weird for a data person, but I cannot do it. But great, now I know that. I've put my information on 2 different types so that you're not trying to compare them, you're trying to contrast them, right? Here, I kept wanting these things to be the same thing because they looked similar. Here, I think I've helped you understand these are 2 different concepts, but they work together. I've built the analysis in. There's a correlation here. I think it's also causation, but that's a bigger conversation. But I've helped you see how these things work together. As you stair step up here, this goes up, and I've helped you understand that. So I know they work together, but I'm not trying to mesh them together. I've used colors that you know from me, right? If I switch to purple and yellow, I'm like, what? Is she okay? Right? Like, what's going on? You know these from the Center for Public Affairs Research. You know these from the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Color here it's not that they're better colors or anything like that. In fact, gray and red, a lot of people can't see, so they're probably not great colors. But you know them from me. I built a little trust, a little reference to us in there. I've grouped things that I think make sense. I've seen this slide where we've done each of these over time, which is kind of interesting, right? The number of people with a bachelor's degree has gone up over time, but now that's a lot of stuff. So I've kind of limited what I show you here. Now I don't show you unemployment. unemployment does go up the same way. It's a similar relationship. I kind of just think I can say that, especially because unemployment is really small. So if I put it on here, you can't see it. That's why, right? Look at these scales, how different they are. 1,909 versus 1.5. I didn't want to do that. And that's why, one, I use different scales, but I also don't try to shove something together that just doesn't look great together. You'll see if we get to my example, that'll be a good one. Here's a great example of not knowing what you're trying to show when you start doing your analysis. This has become a really important set of data for me to work with. But I think in 2018, we did our first infographic on the Nebraska workforce. So I'd like to say we were on it in 2018 before everyone started saying workforce all the time. And this was like the back page. And I just wanted to look at different occupations, and I thought it was interesting how many people worked in them, and I thought it was interesting the percent of the population that worked in them, and I thought it was interesting the median income, and I think I just had them listed out in a table at one time. And then I went ahead and grouped them into high number, high wage, low number, high wage, high number, low wage, low number, low wage. Okay, and I said what it is, but I didn't have a takeaway when I made it. I just kind of thought it was interesting that something was going on there. So now I show this graph a lot, and it breaks a lot of rules, but it also does a lot of really good things. So just to walk you through it, if you haven't seen me do it, on this axis, we have the number of people employed on the horizontal axis. On the vertical axis, we have median wages. So showing number of persons. That was my pet groomer. Sorry. We have number of persons and median income. Those are the two things that I'm showing. And these are all the occupations. So it's the exact same information, but I've done a scatter plot versus a table. Generally, visuals, like we said at the beginning, have more appeal, right? I'm more drawn to them than this particular table, which I think is true. Now, is it a lot of information? Yeah, and that breaks all sorts of rules too. But I've done something here to help you. I've used reference lines at the median for wages and the median for number of people that work there, so that you have these four quadrants. I've made references, I've grouped things so you can make comparison and contrast. I really don't care that you know the occupations, but it's also something a lot of people know and are interested in, right? Where do people work in our economy? It's an important topic. So there you go, right? It's definitely better than this. And it's better than this mostly because I actually had something to prove at some point, right? I kept showing the slide and I was like, what do I want people to know? Okay, here's our economy, but more Nebraskans work in low wage jobs than high wage jobs, right? The takeaway is actually way more interesting here, but now you can see it, right? There's more people down here than up here, right? Number employed. There's more people out here than over here. There's more people working in low wage jobs than high wage jobs. I would also say to people who kind of play in this economic development space, that means, you know, all sorts of ideas are going off for people when we say that, right? But I've made it really easy to see that information. This table wasn't easy. If I did a bar graph of all these occupations, I could show it, but I'm on two really different scales, median income and number of persons. Actually, they're going to be really close, so they're going to look all meshed up. And it's a lot of words. And I don't really need you to know the words. You can go find the ones you want, but you probably don't care about all of them. But hey, if I work in business and finance, now I know. Plus, I can leave it with you, right? You can have it and look at it later and get a lot of data without me being there, which I think is important too, right? We can't always be explaining what we make. So finding ways to leave information with people, I think, is important too. Let's pick on one more from the BLS. Top 10 fastest growing occupations. By the way, industry and occupations are different. People tend to know occupations, industry slightly broader, but occupations are really specific. I don't ever show these. Top 10 fastest growing occupations. But I mean, if you're searching on the Census Bureau, you've already messed up if you put in occupations. Percent change projected 2021 to 31, employment change projected 2021 to 31, median annual wage May 2021. All great information. really do need to know this. So what's happening here? They've grouped on percent change projected, right? They've gone ahead and filtered that. So that's interesting. But I keep looking over here. Does anyone keep looking at this giant green bar? It just looks so different, right? Contrast. So now I'm really focused on that. Employment change projected cooks in restaurants. Well, that's interesting. Cooks in restaurants. My dad was a restaurant chef. That's interesting, but now I'm just hyper focused on it. Is anyone else hyper focused on it? I can't look anywhere else because the contrast is so great. It makes me think that's where I need to look, but it's actually like the least important thing on this slide, right? You really want to be looking at what are these high growth rate things. There's already a lot of cooks. So then when it grows a lot, there's going to be that many more cooks, but that's okay. There's a lot of cooks. We all eat out a lot. But right, we're really interested in what are those high growth jobs. I would also say, right, we're really interested, if you're trying to grow a good economy, you're looking at high wage, high growth jobs. Well, lots of these are not. And it's funny, I'm struggling with this here, right? Everyone's like, oh, the University of Nebraska is going to build the workforce of the future. But the jobs that are open right now are a lot of food and service. And those are not high wage jobs, and that you don't usually need a bachelor's degree for them, but we're working through it. I do think it's of the future, but of the current workforce challenge, we're not really the solution. Don't tell anybody. Okay, right, so they've grouped, they've made contrast, but they haven't totally helped you to understand what you're looking at. They haven't created any reference lines, right? I don't really know where the cutoff for high projections are. I just know 10. I don't think that's very helpful. What's first and last here, right? I have no takeaway, so I'm not left with anything. Here's my version of it. Of course, it looks like this. And I would say as I add variables to this, I both think now people are used to seeing it, so they get good at working with me through this. But also it does get more confusing, and I get that. But all I've done here is the size of the bubble is the projections for growth. And I did use the Department of Labor, Nebraska Department of Labor's instead of the BLS's, just because Nebraska's economy is different. Like nurse practitioners are in super high demand. I don't think we're going to have a lot of wind turbine service technicians in the next 10 years, maybe after that. Ushers, lobby attendants, and ticket takers, we don't have a big accommodation, travel, I don't know what I'm trying to say, travel, tourism, economy. So I don't think that one's going to be big here. So we did our own. Sorry, getting tired. Okay, but the size of the bubbles above the line, median wages, and below the line, these add up to more. High wage jobs are expected to grow faster than low wage jobs. I'm now kind of building on this slide to help you understand what is the difference between high wage and low wage jobs. High wage jobs are also high growth jobs. They're also high education jobs. If you go back to the first slide. So I think it helps people. I'm interested in your perspective. We can talk about that a little bit too, because I know it's also a lot. But I think I give you more information than here too, because this kind of leaves me wondering what's under umpires, right? What's the 20th fastest? And here at least you have a better sense of what's going to go on in the whole economy, although not as specific. I do think this one's a little hard, right? Healthcare support is the one that is going to grow the most. I think it's 23%. It's one really big bubble. There's more bigger bubbles up here, but it is kind of distracting. So I could actually see where this one is not my best. I bet if we went out instead of to 2030, we went out to 2040, 2050, then it's going to be really obvious, and also why we're kind of the future. Okay. Tips to help your audience despite limited attention. I think the number one thing to remember is that they have limited attention. No matter how eager they are to spend time with you, they have limited attention. There are a million tooltips on good data viz. I think the most important one is pick a good graph for the information you're trying to show, but right, there's lots of them. You really have to think through things like that. There's all sorts of these trustworthy, accessible, elegant. not very elegant in my data viz. Look at that thing. Here's some things that I think are pretty easy. Use color really carefully. Build some brand, get people to know that's from you and that they can trust your data viz. Limit the number of variables you show. I know I show a lot, but to the extent that you can keep it simple, like that argumentation piece, this leads to this, leads to this, is on your side. Build the analysis into your visual, right? Don't just show the scatter plot. Make sure you put the red lines helping people to group. Right, make sure you tell them what the difference between something is. Sometimes I have a bubble up here you've probably seen. If 10% of this went into this, we create $1 billion in 1 year. That's nuts. But now I've just told you it's a big difference without you even having to look at the slide. Sometimes I talk about how many jobs require a bachelor's degree here. But right, I'm helping people to understand how to work with the slide, what to take away. Build the analysis in. Increase your viewers' working memory. Think about comparison, contrast, reference, repetition, grouping, timing. The first thing I say and the last thing I say may be the only things you take away. That's okay. Just make sure the first and last things I say are worthy. They may or may not be. Last analytical point, visual simplicity, narrative complexity. I see people talk about these two concepts together all the time. This is my phrasing of it, visual simplicity. If you want people to learn data, you can't make it complicated to find the data. But just because a design, right, a visual is easy, does not mean the values, the arguments, the ideas behind it are. And that's why narrative complexity can help deal with what are some really difficult things to untangle. Policy, the decisions we make are not easy. They are not based on one data point. So allow the narrative to support you. Narrative is also essential. Humans connect with other humans, much more so than data, right? We are not data minded. We have to learn to be data minded. Evidence and argumentation are not natural to us. Other people are natural to us. So narrative is essential, and you miss something if you don't provide it. Just a good quote on this. It's simply naive to believe that if you present people with facts, they're going to take them. And it happens to me all the time. I so convince myself that this data is going to be the turning point. I remember a scatter plot of school districts by number of students and cost per student. And I thought, wow, this is a game changer. Like once you see this, you can't not want to fix it. We don't fix it, right? It is naive to believe that if I present people with a set of facts, just because I see it, that they're going to see it. Okay, people really can't weigh data in a detached way because we naturally understand the complexity of people. So this particular quote goes on to say that policymakers look for things that are reasonable, clear, and are available at the right time. Timeliness of providing data is another great point too. I think that's probably a little simple on what policymakers are looking for. But I do think we really try to overcomplicate it, or we think a data point or a lot of data are somehow going to solve the problem. The issues are complex. Our analysis should be as well. So visual simplicity, narrative complexity. Give you some examples of when we've done this. So right at the height of COVID, we worked on 2 waves of a COVID business survey where we asked businesses, hey, what do you need from the government? Gosh, can you remember back to that time? It was so wild. And we really didn't know how to respond to these things. So in that particular case, I wasn't like, oh, we can use any data. We need new data on this. We don't know. And then we have continued some work in the small business space, came out with a report on entrepreneurship in Nebraska. We're actually going to be announcing soon that we received a $310,000 grant to continue to explore entrepreneurship ecosystems here in Nebraska. Super excited about that. But we don't have a high rate of entrepreneurship. That's what this map is saying. hey, we spend a lot of time. We've spent a lot of money trying to create small businesses and entrepreneurship growth and development here in Nebraska, and we're kind of not hitting yet. People don't want to hear that. I understand why they don't want to hear that. We've spent a lot of time and money trying to do these things. And I will say I have presented on these topics and seen people get like physically anxious when I talk about this. I think it's then helpful to know that we also did interviews along with our surveys and data analysis. We did interviews. People fight with the data. Well, I didn't say that. That's not true. That's them. That's not me. Well, that's that organization. I didn't say that. But then you kind of get into the narrative where like, hey, actually many of you did describe problems, that there are things to work on. And it's not all negative, right? These are opportunity moments, but we need to embrace them. And so I find, particularly when the data is hard to take, the narrative, the things you all said, I didn't say it, right? I think a lot of people want to blame me with data. It's not my data. I moved here. I'm the exception, right? But they want to be like, oh, that's not true. I don't want to accept that. But when they hear from themselves, actually, we talk to people like you, and this is what they said. They start to get it a little bit more, or they kind of have to accept it. Here's another one. I like to show this slide all the time, and people like to fight with this slide all the time. Compared to white males, all other gender, racial, and ethnic identity intersections earn less. This is the population 16 and over with earnings. White male to Latina making 56% of a white male. I don't know why those numbers didn't change. Anyway, median income's up here. Look at all these people sort of making below the median income by their intersections. So I bet all of you right now are saying, well, what about full-time versus part-time? What about when women leave the workforce to have children? What about educational status? You told me that matters for income. And I usually follow this up by saying, nationally, controlling for race, education, occupation, class of worker, employment status, full, part-time, unemployed, and age, women still make about 14,000 less, and it's still statistically significant. Same model in Nebraska, women make just under 12,000 less. I've done the research on the topic. We make less, but people want to fight with it. And people don't want to accept it. And I don't want to accept it. I don't think I'm surrounded by a bunch of sexist, racist people. I don't feel that my organizations are that way, particularly my organization, but it is a fact. Even when we think about all the reasons someone might or might not make more than someone else. But then you read something like this, and I find it really empowering. This is from a project we recently did. Nebraska Cures and Bio Nebraska sponsored it. There's a whole website, nebraskawomenInSTEM.com. If you are interested in this topic, take the pledge, get involved. Hopefully this is going to be a whole movement. But my awesome research associate, Dr. Morgan Vogel, interviewed 48 women in STEM here in Nebraska and said, hey, what do you think? And we got a range of quotes, again, a lot of positive movement and things going on, but we heard things like this. I'd like to say that I wasn't discriminated against. I would like to say that I wasn't held back, that I wasn't held to a different standard, but that wouldn't be true. And so sadly, even in our current conditions, I still see things happen to women and minorities in the STEM fields that aren't terribly encouraging. I really think from an economic standpoint, we need to figure that out in Nebraska, because until we embrace diversity, we're not going to have true economic growth. If I say it, it kind of seems self-serving maybe, or again, it's just like a hard thing to know is true. Racism and sexism exist, right? We don't want to accept that. But when we hear from the women themselves, right? When you know this isn't me, right? Someone out there in our communities, interviewee 11, works really hard in the STEM field, which we know is high wage, high growth. It's an important sector for us. They feel it. Right? It kind of makes you double step back a little. And it's funny when the sponsors asked for a qualitative study with interviews, I was like, really? Do we need to? But they were spot on, right? Until we hear these stories, listening, then acting, that narrative complexity of it all, it's going to get us over the hump, or I really hope it gets us over the hump, because this is something. I said to a group the other day in presentation, I was like, what if on the billboards we were like, we pay women more? I think people would come. Like, I'd come for that. Right, but until we get over the hump that it is true, until we accept that beginning of the argument, we can't do something about it. And that's a lot of what this is too, right? We have to get people to want to change. And so they have to follow the full logic of the argument. If they don't accept the first assumption that women make less, they're not going to do anything about it. So it gets us over the hump in this case. Here's another one. Here in the College of Public Affairs and Community Service, the Goodrich Scholarship Program is in their 50th year. They're doing all sorts of celebrations. If you're a Goodrich Scholar, you're awesome and we love you. They asked us to do a return on investment analysis. Return on investment analysis is a type of financial analysis. Maybe Craig Maher will cover it later. And it's really basic data that I used in this analysis to get there, but it's also a lot of economic assumptions, right? And so I threw this little infographic handout say that for every $1 invested in a Goodrich Scholar, 479 are returned after 10 years. It's 1 in 19 if you do it after 1 year. And then I kind of work through how I get to those numbers, what students I include in the analysis, what I don't. But economic assumptions, a lot of people don't really accept them, and it's a little complicated. But then my really good friend, Cindy Gonzalez at the Nebraska Examiner did some interviews with Goodrich students, and you get stories like this. Roxana Cortez Mills, now 31 and a lawyer at the Nebraska Immigrant Legal Center, said she came out of the Goodrich program's autobiographical writing class, realizing that public service in the field of law is what she was meant to do. It opened up opportunities and redefined what success looked like for my family. She said, adding that her younger sister was a Goodrich Scholar and is now finishing her doctorate in physical therapy at UNMC. Right? No matter how many times I tell you there is a return on this investment, when you hear about a lawyer and a doctor, you go, wow, this is a great program. And by the way, they're here in Nebraska. I'm going to, 69% of Goodrich alumni surveyed live in the metropolitan Omaha area, 78% live in Nebraska. So they stay here too. Anyway, but right, we can tell people that, but when you hear the story, that's super powerful and makes a difference. Visual simplicity, narrative complexity. Couple tips here. Use all your data, all of it. Anecdotes, administrative documents, news, other people's research, right? If you go back to when I was talking about gross versus net, right? I didn't do that research, but someone did it, so I know about it. Use all of your data. Use national data, use another state's data. It's fine, it's data. It helps you make the point. I think people drop their data. I see this a lot in nonprofits too. They want to do a survey, they want to do interviews. You talk to those folks you work with every day. That's data, right? Don't not use it. You know, someone turned in an application and said something, it's data. Maybe ask them if you can use it, but you should be using all your data. You should not just be focused on what the Census Bureau has or, you know, what new data you can collect. You have a lot of data. We're not always using it. Narrative storytelling, like argumentation, has an arc. I don't go too in depth here, and it's really not my field. I'm much more on the argumentation data visual side, but I would really think about a good arc in your story. There's a character, right? We have a clear character, someone we know. They have a problem. They have a turning point, a solution, Goodrich. And then we have a resolution. Here's how they're doing today. You want to collect stories in that arc too. I see a lot of people who collect stories, but they're not really helping them. I was actually looking at a lot of news articles here, and I was like, why don't they use that quote with that data point, right? So be careful, right, that your narrative actually helps your data story, doesn't hurt your data story or distract. But to the extent also that it can really, you can connect with someone. Remember, we care about people. So a character, I would say like the women in STEM, interviewee 11 is not as good as Roxana, right? She makes a point, we know her. The problem, always defining that problem. It's a great place to use narrative to get into that second point. Identify the stakes, the urgency, right? Oh my gosh, they wouldn't have had this success without Goodrich. That quote doesn't kind of do it, but I think the whole article actually does pretty well, right? Without a scholarship, I would not have gone to college. Thus, I would not be a lawyer. right? It's real. And then the resolution, how are they doing today? Tell people how the narrative fulfills your argument. Narrative can be used in lots of different places and lots of different ways. I like it best to identify the stakes and urgency and explaining intangible benefits, right? A number doesn't always tell the story. Someone makes more money if they get a bachelor's degree, but look at the success they're having, right? Cycles of poverty are ended. Whole families, me and my sister are doing better as a result. So explaining those intangible impacts, people care about other people. They want to see them doing well. Data points kind of suck life out of the story. Okay, so 3 substantive takeaways. I hope you believe me on these things, although I didn't spend a ton of time doing all of them. Nebraskans are leaving the state for job opportunities. Education is essential to high wage and high growth jobs in Nebraska. Showed you a lot of correlation there. Entrepreneurship, wage equity, and education, entrepreneurship report, some work we've done on wage equity, and right, just with that Goodrich Scholarship Program, they are really important for bolstering Nebraska's economy. We didn't get too much into that. We used it more as an example, but I hope you see those connections. 3 analytical takeaways. Apply the rules of argumentation to your analysis. Know that your audience has limited attention. I can't wait to hear how many of the state senators y'all got. When I did it, I think they read over 20 to make me feel better, but I think I got 5. Visual simplicity, narrative complexity. Don't miss the stories that people tell and know. This slide has tons of resources. These are all sorts of things I've read in the past or in prepping for this. Again, I wish there was a textbook that was like data viz with census data made simple. It doesn't exist, but I hope that's what we're here for and can help you with, and lots of links to different things on our website. So with that, I want to take some questions. I see some coming in. Okay. I was wondering what table you use to find the reasons why people move from Nebraska. It says 2018 to 2021 current population, but it's not very clear to me what I used. That is correct, because it's not. So when you go to, gosh, this was way back, huh? When you go to data.census.gov, you can access decennial census data and you can access American Community Survey data. You can access a couple other things, but those 2 are the big ones that people use from there. And this, because those are really big surveys, they make estimates to the whole population and they calculate all these tables and they make it really accessible. The current population survey is less accessible. There is not a table to go to. I actually downloaded IPUM's data, micro data of the current population survey and analyzed it myself because I know we're really interested in that question here in Nebraska. That is something I can do. That's something many of you probably can do, but not everyone can. And that's why I talk about reframing your argument. If you don't have the data, are you sure that's the argument you want to make? Why, how, or partner with someone to get that data. But in this particular one, I downloaded microdata. Microdata is something I'm really interested in. It's something I work with. I use advanced statistical programs to work with it. I'm throwing that out as a possible, if anyone's interested, when you take the evaluation later, let us know that you're interested in that. We'd be willing to offer some small group classes hands-on on how to do that. But you do have to have some big data set knowledge. I think the data set I used for that, I think I had over 1.5 million cases in it. So you really got to use a statistical package. You can't use Excel. Anyway, current population survey, there are some tables that they put on the website that you can download like an Excel file for, some smaller summary tables, but I always use the microdata on that. Do you have any tips on inclusive data visualization for people with disabilities? Some graphs are complicated and the screen reader cannot read them well. Great question. And I don't know if maybe Cami will talk about it later. I'm not sure. I can stop my share here for a minute. So this is an area that we are really interested in. Actually, our graphic designer, Tara Grell, for the Nebraska Rural Transit website. If you guys don't know about that, nebraskatransit.com. We helped build that. She went through a whole process to work with some accessibility. And one of the things that was particularly hard, we had a tableau, and I do use Tableau for some of my data viz, of where some of the rural transit agencies were located, and it is not particularly accessible. And so then we ended up having a Tableau and a table and a like HTML list, right? And it loses elegance, I can say that. But it is really important. I think probably the biggest tip I have right now is sort of off the top of my head, but something we could totally talk about more in the future. Know your audience, right? If your audience is going to have challenges reading or looking at something, you need to fix it. You need to think about other ways to do it. I would say sometimes actually maybe a table is okay because a screen reader will grab it. We actually just worked on the Nebraska State Aging Plan with the Area's Agency on Aging, and a good colleague of mine and faculty member in gerontology, Dr. Julie Masters, my writing is small on things. And so, right, I need to think about that. Who's my audience and what kind of things can I make that are accessible? I think it's just another step, another process. I have heard, I'm trying to think of the name of it. I heard of a program that people were adding into Tableau to help read them a little bit better, but I don't have, I'll look up the name of it. I have it written down. I remember looking at it. And I know this is a space people are adapting on pretty quickly. So I think a lot of it is keep up with what's going on, but also think about your audience and try to appeal to them and try to make it easy for them. Goodrich Scholars may be a relevant question. Did the scholarship opportunity have a stated expectation that they stay in the state? I think an example of state of Nebraska employees have tuition assistance, but the stated expectation is they stayed. No, Goodrich Scholars do not have, but they do stay. I'm doing all this work in kind of the role of education and community building and economic achievement. And there's actually this research on economic connectedness. I don't know if you guys know about the Opportunity Atlas. It's a Census Bureau and Harvard, a bunch of Harvard economists, like big time, have made this whole dashboard of social mobility and economic mobility of young people. And one of the things they say is, right, when they have these really great experiences, one, like a Goodrich Scholar, but economic connectedness, when we meet people of different social classes, different economic status than us, it gives us more of a safety net. It helps propel us in life. And so I think higher education generally, but especially a program like the Goodrich Scholars, where they get together in small groups and really work through things, creates that economic connectedness that then makes people want to stay here. We don't even have to require it. They want to stay here more. Anyway, I'm working through that research. It's not published anymore. Would you return to the slide on tips for audience attention and maybe reference which resource you use for that slide? Data viz improvement is very important in our work. I hear you. And so let me go back to my screen. I'm actually going to run to my resources slide. There's the one you were talking about. But I'll just run you through a couple things that I've worked with. There are so many data viz books. There are podcasts. I mean, you can go down a rabbit hole of rules. I truly think you got to get hands-on with it. Oh, and maybe we'll have a little time to do that. But let me point out, Column 5 Media is just like an online magazine, but they are very big into data viz. So Why Your Brain Loves Visual Content and Infographics, that's actually where that image on that slide came from. But they have great rules and tips all the time. This book, Storytelling with Data, I actually have it right here. I actually went to one of her trainings. I think she was at Google before she started her own consulting firm. She does trainings for folks. What I did really like about it, she uses Excel for a lot of her data viz, so easy, accessible things we all really have. Yeah, I took it a while ago, and I have the book, so if anybody wants to borrow it, that's fine too. It's helpful. It's very She doesn't work a lot with the numbers, right? She doesn't talk about how to make arguments, but truly how to pare down data viz to make it simple and accessible. Really good at that. This Andy Kirk book, Data Visualization Handbook for Data-Driven Design. I don't think I have it with me. It's a big old textbook. It's very good, lots of examples. Lots of examples of good viz. One of the things I'll say about the storytelling with data book, she'll take bad viz and make it good. So that's really helpful for getting some experience. Trying to see which other ones are really good for data viz. I think those are the two big ones I used here. I used a lot of my own experience and sort of the takeaways there. Oh, and then the research on argument dilution. And so when the more names I say, I think I have them up there too, but I've actually seen that done. Oh, this is the magical mystery for how is working memory capacity limited. So this is research that says that number is 7 and the kind of tips for making it a little bit better. I'll just run to that slide too. All right. This is mostly from my experience, I would say. We're doing a little research on visual formatting. We put in a grant for it. I don't know if it'll get done. If we'll achieve the money on it, but I really think data viz connects with some people, but doesn't connect with everyone. So definitely verbal and visual. Oh, this isn't my tip slide. Sorry. Yeah, verbal and visual is my big one. These are just, right, there's all of these sort of platitudes, things you can do to make data viz better. These are my experience ones. And then these ideas of working memory and just kind of thinking about what that means. Yeah, it's hard. If data viz is really interested to you, let us know. We'd love to spend more time. I think data viz is a rapidly developing field, right? Things that were cool 2 years ago are not what we're doing anymore. So that's something we could all learn together on too. What other ways to visualize the data besides bar, pie, and tabular format? Really appreciate your input. Right, here's the professor's answer. You use the right graph for the viz you're trying to make, right? I don't think there's a best viz to use or one I really like to use. I actually don't like pie charts. There are all sorts of things. Here's what I'll say to kind of change it up. Not only try to use some of your working memory tips. Reference lines. This compared to what? This in contrast to what? Trying to pull your analysis into your data. That's what I would think about. Not necessarily what type of chart to use, but what compels people to look at this thing. If you go back to that BLS bar charts versus my scatter plot or my, I think that's called a double axis graph. So it's a bar and a line, right? So yeah, I use all sorts of weird charts. Bullet graphs I know are in Tableau. If anybody uses Tableau, they have a whole sort of, these are all the standard graphs we can kind of make, just like Excel too. I would say I have an awesome graphic designer, Tara Grell. You can't see this, but a lot of times we just put the number with an explanation for it, and that really makes a point too. Like sometimes you don't need really complicated data viz. And I think a lot of people miss that too. If it's one data point you want people to know, just use it. Stephanie Evergreen has several blog posts about accessibility and being 501 compliant in data viz. I've used the Stephanie Evergreen website too, so that's another great data viz example. Okay, I think anybody else want to get in some questions? If not, we have a couple minutes and feel free to get them in. I'm like kind of embarrassed to show you this, but I'm going to show you this. Okay. So I'm going to take this out before I post it, but so I have this belief, right? This conclusion that our economy is really stagnant. And what I mean is production continues, but it's not growing as fast as other places. And I think that has a lot to do with the high wage, low wage jobs. I know this is ugly. I don't want anyone on my team to be like, why'd you show that ugly slide? This is the point of the slide. So, right, high wage jobs create low wage jobs. I know that from other research, but now I'm trying to find a data viz that helps communicate that argument to folks. Right, high wage jobs create low wage jobs. I don't want to do a crazy economic analysis. I really just want to show, in comparison, places with more high wage workers are growing faster than places like us with a lot of low wage workers. So that's the point I want to make. And that's where I start my research, right? And it is particularly an outgrowth of that job opportunities and pay things. I think people need to understand that when we have a lot of low wage workers, they don't have any flex time or money to grow and create big entrepreneurship. So I think these things all work together. I need to show it. And I don't have a great idea. So I was kind of messing around and looking for a comparison and contrast, right? Places with high wage workers grow faster. So I pulled the data on Austin, Texas, which I think was interesting because in 2013, why am I using 2013 on this standard table from the Census Bureau? They changed the data on occupations and income in 2013. So it wouldn't match up if I went to 2010. So I went to 2013. But interesting enough, the state of Nebraska as a whole and the Austin, Texas metro had a fairly similar number of people working in 2013. By 2020, they had grown by 24%. We had only grown by 5%. So I think I got something, right? And then I pulled this table. So this is 2020 Nebraska, 2013 Nebraska. Also think it's important for you guys to see how messy I work sometimes, right? When you're just thinking through things, I'm just trying things. Percent difference, Nebraska percent difference by occupations. So I added some things up, I calculated some percent difference. I think I have something here. And then I actually did sort this by high wage jobs, which I was just doing based on a median of 40,000. Oh, and they do have more high wage workers in 2013, and they've grown high wage workers faster. So I kind of think I have something. So I made a chart, right? Just a standard Excel. Let me see. And it's really not that interesting, but okay, Austin grew faster. Then I tried to make it like our style and I was like, oh, that's real ugly, right? So I'll never show this to people, but this is the process, right? I have an argument first. I get some data, standard Census Bureau table. I think I have it cited on another slide with the scatter plots. Do some analysis, percent difference, nothing fancy, right? We can all do that. I haven't done a regression yet. I haven't done a regression anywhere in here. Oh, then I sorted the data by high wage and low wage, kind of just playing with what those concepts look like. Now, this is just the overall. That's really ugly. Maybe I'm going to show it by high wage and low wage. Maybe please let me know if you have ideas for me. Maybe I'm gonna show it by different occupations. Maybe I'm gonna add other cities. I honestly think a metro versus state comparison is terrible, but I did think it was interesting that they were the same size. Maybe I'll do, but it's hard to, yeah. Well, so that's what I'm working through. And I hope in example, it's kind of helpful. Anybody have any ideas for me? Maybe next time. Okay, so we're a couple minutes early, but I think that's probably good for everyone. I want to thank you guys for spending the morning with me. I hope it was helpful. Like I said, if you have any ideas for me, or if there are anything you really want to spend more time on, we can totally do that. We're really interested in offering more of these professional development opportunities. So let us know using the evaluation link. Right now, we are going to take a 15-minute break, and we are going to come back at the breakout room Zoom link to join at 10:45. It is in your chat. Thank you, Matt, for doing that. Thank you so much for spending the morning with us. If you're not coming back, please take your evaluation. If not, I will see you at 10:45 for our breakouts. Thanks so much.